There's a specific kind of uneasiness that comes from not having a name for what you are. And for almost 30 years, if you were born somewhere between 1976 and 1985, that's exactly where you lived. In this weird generational no man's land, where Gen X didn't quite claim you, Millennials definitely didn't want you, and every personality quiz online kept spitting out results that felt like they were describing someone else entirely, someone adjacent, but not you. Demographers are still trying to figure out how much microgenerations like this one even matter as a category. The term Xennial itself first appeared in a 2014 piece in Good magazine written by Sarah Stanorb, and it stuck. The academic world wasn't rushing to validate it, but a large number of people read it and quietly thought, finally, that's the word. So, let's actually talk about what's going on psychologically. Because the Xennial experience isn't just, oh, I remember cassette tapes, and also I have Instagram. It's something considerably more nuanced than that. You grew up being bored. Actually bored. Not the scrolling through videos for 3 hours feeling empty kind of bored. I mean, genuinely staring at the ceiling board on a Sunday afternoon, watching the numbers on the microwave clock tick from 247 to 248, because that was legitimately the most interesting thing happening, and no way to make that feeling stop except to go outside or read something or just sit with it. And your brain learns to tolerate that, to come up with its own entertainment. You appreciated that discomfort isn't always a signal that something needs to be fixed immediately. Then, somewhere in your early to mid-20s, you watched that entire paradigm evaporate. The weight of that specific transition isn't the technology arrived while you were young or that you grew up fully native to it. It's that you experienced both during a very specific stage of development. And that's the detail people usually skip past. The prefrontal cortex, the region most associated with adaptability, risk assessment, and incorporating new information into existing mental frameworks, is still actively developing until your late 20s. Research by Jay Gedd at the National Institutes of Health helped establish this extended maturation window, and since been replicated consistently enough that the basic finding isn't really contested anymore. What that means practically is that Xennials at this technological rupture, while their brains were still, quite literally in the middle of being built, plastic enough to absorb new systems, yet old enough to carry the memory of what came before. And the rupture itself was seismic. Pew Research found that in 1995, just 14% of American adults had internet access. By 2005, that number was 68%. An entire civilizational shift in a single decade, landing slap bang in the middle of Xennial adulthood. So Xennials are probably the last generation who had an adolescence that left no trace. And I want to be clear that this is a cultural observation. But think about what it actually means. Every cringeworthy thing you said at 17 and every bad decision at 22, those relationships that ended badly, regrettable phases you went through and since outgrown, gone without a trace. Not something a future employer or stranger can pull up on their phone. Human memory by design is reconstructive. We don't play back experiences like video files. We reassemble them each time slightly differently, influenced by who we are now. Elizabeth Loftus's decades of research on this is some of the most replicated. Memory is more interpretation than it is storage. And that changes over time, sometimes dramatically. Xennials got to let their pasts change shape the way human memory was always meant to work. The embarrassment faded. The story became something you controlled. What it means for younger generations to grow up with a permanent, searchable record of their own development, nobody fully knows yet. But it's a different psychological landscape to be in. There's another layer here that I think gets underestimated. A significant chunk of Xennials entered the job market between roughly 1997 and 2008, which means many of them walked directly into the dot collapse, the 2008 financial crisis, or in some cases both. During the exact window when early career momentum is supposed to be building, economist Lisa Kahn's research on recession graduates found that entering the workforce during a downturn can suppress earnings trajectories for a decade or more. You'd wish it was a temporary setback, but it changes your sense of what stable ground even feels like. And it doesn't just affect your bank account. It becomes a kind of internal weather system, a low hum of contingency planning that never fully turns off even after things stabilize. Even after the job is secure and the rent is covered, some part of you keeps one eye on the exit, just in case. So you've got a group that's adaptable, carrying an analog childhood into a digital present, with a quiet anxiety about stability running underneath all of it. Well, luckily, most Xennials seem to be holding it. The thing I keep returning to when I think about this group is a concept from psychology called bicultural identity. It was originally built around people who live between two different cultures: immigrants, kids who grew up across multiple countries, people whose home life and outside world operated by completely different rules. A large-scale review of 83 studies by Nguyen and Bennett Martinez found that having to move between two genuinely different worlds doesn't create confusion. It tends to make them more mentally flexible than people who only ever had to operate inside one. Now, applying that to time periods rather than cultures is my interpretation, not settled science. But bear with me, because the world before the internet and the world after it weren't just different in terms of technology. They ran on different logic, different expectations around attention, privacy, how you maintain relationships, what it even means to be present with another person. And Xennials speak both languages, according to me. You can switch your phone off for an afternoon and be totally fine, and also pick up new software without needing a tutorial. You remember when canceling plans last minute was actually a big deal because you had to call someone's home phone and hope they picked up, and that created a different kind of reliability in people. You also remember the first time Google Maps existed and thinking genuinely, how did anyone get anywhere before this? Well, maybe except for when you were a kid. Those two versions of you coexist without much friction. Quite remarkable. Every generation is shaped by the specific pressures it formed inside of, and most of them get talked about. Xennials, for whatever reason, largely didn't. The particular combination of experiences this group carries, the adaptability, the undocumented adolescence, the economic timing, and the genuine bilingualism between two completely different ways of living, it sits at an inflection point in human history that the cultural conversation keeps skating past. Most people alive right now either don't remember the before or can't fully imagine the after. Xennials remember both in their bodies and habits, in the fact that you probably still instinctively leave longer voicemails than anyone wants to receive. If you've watched this entire video while quietly recognizing yourself in most of it, that's hopefully not a coincidence. The specificity of the Xennial experience is real, and it's still largely unexamined in mainstream conversations about who we are and why you spent a long time not having a name for it. So hopefully this brought you some self-recognition. If you're interested in exploring these ideas further, I've put together a collection of books that dive deeper into psychology, human behavior, and independent thinking. You can find the full list through the link in the description and pinned comment on my bookshop page. And if you enjoy content like this, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss future videos. Also, hit the join button if you want to help keep these psychology deep dives going. I appreciate all the support and can't thank you guys enough.